Here we go in three, two, one.
Folks, what is up, and welcome back to the Vol Talk podcast. We're here with yet another special episode. Today, we are going to be talking about the Tennessee Vols who got drafted in this NFL draft that just occurred a few days ago. So, folks, you are here with myself, Blake. You're here, as always, with my brother, Austin. And joining us yet again is special guest Dakota. We always love having him on. Gentlemen, welcome. We've got a few things to talk about. First and foremost, we had a Vol taken in the first round. You always love to see that. But then we've also got a couple surprises that we're going to be talking about. And we're even going to talk about some of the guys who didn't get drafted and surprisingly ended up in the league as an undrafted free agent at the very end. So a lot to talk about tonight. And we're going to go in order of how these Vols got drafted. But both of you just kind of give me a heads up on your thoughts, kind of just overall on how the Vols did in this draft. Dakota, I want to start with you because I want to give you a special shout out. When we did our NFL draft preview for our Vols, we were talking about James Pierce Jr., and you said, hey, you know what? Once I believe it was the Panthers, once they get that eighth pick, the defensive edge class should kind of start flying off the board. And you were talking about James Pierce Jr. and you said, the first team that came out of your mouth was the Atlanta Falcons as a possible landing spot for him. Now, granted, that was ideally with the 15th pick. They ended up taking him with the 26th pick, but still in the first round. But yeah, Dakota, give us your initial thoughts on how the Vols did in this draft.
Yeah, I think overall, I would have expected to see a couple more guys get drafted. We had four total. I think a couple went slightly higher than I expected, and then Samson went a little bit lower. But the main thing was seeing James Pierce Jr. go in that first round. A lot of what we talked about was him specifically with the off the field stuff that started to come up, and he was our main chance at having another first round pick. And they did, and the team actually traded up for him, which we'll dive into in a second. But that was awesome to see.
Absolutely. Austin, what's your take on kind of initial reaction to how the Vols did in this draft?
Yeah, man. I mean, the guys that we thought were going to get drafted got drafted. Those four guys that we talked about mainly on the draft preview show, and we were kind of hoping, hey, Brew McCoy's there, Cooper Mays is there. Those are all other possibilities. Didn't end up happening, but listen, teams are still signing UDFAs, so they're definitely a possibility for that. Um, but most of our guys either got picked right around their consensus or above their consensus. So, I mean, I thought overall it was a solid draft. But if you want me to be completely honest, Blake, and I'm not going to be too pessimistic on this podcast, but if you look at some of the other teams around college football, man, Ohio State had 14 players drafted. I think Texas had like 12 players drafted. That's where you want to be. If you want to compete for national championships, the correlation between NFL players and national championship teams is very clear. The more players drafted, the better the team is. I mean, the year Washington went to the national championship, they had the second most players drafted. And Washington never has a lot of players drafted. So, listen, it correlates to team success.
Absolutely. We've talked in the past about that, right? That not every great college football player ends up becoming a great NFL player. However, pretty much every, player that gets drafted to the NFL or does well in the NFL, you can almost guarantee they were pretty good in college, right? That is very strong correlation indeed. And so the more guys we're going to have drafted, obviously, the better we're going to have been doing while they were on our roster. So we definitely want to continue to step up that game in terms of talent that Josh Heupel brings in. We'll dive into all of this, folks. We're going to go player by player again, starting with James Pierce Jr. and then going down the board in terms of the Vols. The four Vols that did get drafted, as Dakota and Austin talked about there. And then we'll talk about those guys who got picked up as undrafted free agents. But first and foremost, I just want to thank you all so much for y'all's support so far on the channel. We've been growing a lot lately, and so we cannot thank you all enough for your support of the channel, watching our episodes, subscribing, dropping likes on the videos, and also comments. We really appreciate y'all's comments, everyone who's been engaging with our video. So please do that right now. If you have any thoughts on these Vols in this draft, go ahead and drop a comment below, give us a like on the video, and subscribe if you haven't already. We'd really appreciate it. But gentlemen, let's hop right into James Pierce Jr. He got drafted first round. Great to see, right? There were some questions, character questions Now, we're not going to talk about the main headline in this draft when it comes to character questions, right? That's not Vols related. However, James Pierce Jr. was one of those players that had some potential character questions. And so we were thinking, where's he going to fall, right? He did get drafted in the first round. He went to the Atlanta Falcons with pick 26. So, Austin, talk us through just, that landing spot for him, how he fits with the Falcons, and just your overall take on that.
Well, I think we got to start with just talking about the Falcons just for a second because they took Jalen Walker at 15. Some Vols fans might know Jalen Walker. We played Jalen Walker every year he was in college. He played at Georgia. I don't think they expected Jalen Walker to be there, Blake, because they were heavily debating taking James Pierce at 15. So if Jalen Walker was not there at 15, they were taking James Pierce. That was pretty much the debate. It was Jalen Walker or James Pierce. And they thought James Pierce was worth so much that they used next year's first round pick to trade back into the first round to pick up James Pierce, which I find fascinating, man. That just speaks to how highly they think of James Pierce, the player. And from the Falcons' perspective, I love it for them pairing those two guys together off the edge. It's going to be fascinating to watch. But from Pierce's perspective, it was awesome to see because I was watching the draft at Dakota's house, and it was starting to look pretty grim for Pierce because although the edge class did start to fly off the board, there were still guys left that, hey, some other guys available that could have went ahead of James Pierce. So I was kind of worried that he might fall to the second round, but didn't end up happening, man. Fell at 26 to the Falcons. So I'm very excited to see what he can do at the next level.
Yeah, that was very exciting to see. Again, obviously we want our Vols not only drafted, but drafted in the first round. So very, very cool that they traded up to get back into the first round to snag him off the board. And the Falcons are probably feeling pretty good, right, Dakota, about being able to get both of those players.
Absolutely, yeah. And it says a lot about how high they had him on their board. To be debating him at 15 with Jalen Walker still on the board, and then to basically say he's worth 2 first-round picks to come back up to get him means he was probably top 10 on their draft board. And once that pick came along, they were like, well, how could we possibly leave this guy on the board? Like, these teams are crazy for letting him fall. So always a really cool feeling to see, a team trade up to get you. So love that for James Pierce. And yeah, I mean, the Falcons in the first round just completely overhauled their edge situation by getting Jalen Walker and then also adding James Pierce Jr., who is going to have a path to start right now. He is probably listed as a starter in their depth chart right now, and will have an opportunity to grow alongside Jalen Walker, which is awesome for them. But yeah, seeing them trade up, that says a lot about where he was. And obviously, other teams didn't necessarily agree with that. Because he did fall to that point, but the Falcons at least liked him enough, had a good enough interview with him and whatnot to say, his talent is top 10 in this draft, so we are not letting him fall anymore. We will burn a first round pick next year to go get this guy, and we want him on our team. So that's awesome.
Absolutely awesome to see for sure. And look, another awesome thing is almost split exactly the difference between your two gentlemen's official predictions for James Pierce. Dakota, you came in at 32nd, going to the Lions, and Austin, I believe you came in at 19. And so, at 26, he literally almost completely splits the difference between those predictions. So, look, I'm not saying that Vol Talk should be your premier source for football information because we've got the best analysis on the internet. But I'm just leaving it out there for you to make your own decision.
I didn't say that. That was Blake. And you also meant to say Eagles, not Lions earlier, by the way. Eagles 30.
Did I say Lions?
You did. You said Lions.
Well, that's really embarrassing that I just said that we've got the best.
Just said, yes, it is kind of embarrassing. But, yeah, we did almost split the difference.
Y'all did, which is very cool. Listen, honestly, probably in my head, I was thinking I wish the Lions had won the Super Bowl last year.
Yeah,
Austin has talked about how we kind of like the Lions because our dad's from Michigan, and plus, who doesn't like a good final, like decades in the making comeback story for the Eagles organization, right? But anyway, so sorry, Freudian slip there, folks. Eagles, not the Lions. But yeah. I'm still going to leave it for you to decide if this is the best content on the internet when it comes to football analysis. Gentlemen, any other thoughts on James Pierce at that pick and specifically how he fits with the Falcons, Austin or Dakota?
So he is listed as a starter on the Our Lands depth chart right now. He is absolutely going to get in and play immediately. And listen, just quick analysis again on James Pierce. James Pierce was probably at least a top 15 talent in this draft. He did slip a slightly. I mean, 26 isn't a long slip. Like he was right around his consensus ranking, but I mean, he's definitely a top 15 talent in this draft, man. So if he can get into the league and he can work hard and just kind of eliminate those character concerns, he's going to be a fantastic player. I really think we just put another fantastic player to the draft. And like I said, man, it's good to stack up these first round picks. You know, it helps recruiting and it just helps the brand in general. And as we've already mentioned, it correlates to winning. So the more first round picks, the better. And it's Josh Heupel's first defensive first rounder. So that's interesting as well. But yeah,
I
I
was just
think,
about to mention that it's
yeah,
huge that we got a defensive first rounder for sure.
exactly, man. And it just speaks to like the emphasis that they've put on the defensive side of the ball. So yeah, I mean, I'm excited to see what he does at the next level. And I think he's going to be good, man. I really do.
Yeah,
Dakota,
completely
you
agree
agree
with
with
that.
that?
Yeah, absolutely. I think he will. I mean, his skill set, he's one of the best. I mean, from a pure edge perspective and pass rush ability, his percentile in terms of pass rush win rate and everything was like 96th, 98th percentile. Like he was technically ahead of Abdul Carter, who went third overall. So from a athleticism and production perspective, he's one of the best. So one thing that can hopefully help him too with the off the field stuff that's interesting is that going into this process, Jalen Walker was considered like the opposite, where he was a high character, low production guy. So the Falcons have paired those two together. So maybe that'll help, but they can kind of help each other grow. James Pierce can coach him up. Jalen maybe could be a good friend to him, help him keep his head on right or whatever's going on there. But I think it could be a really good situation for him there in Atlanta.
That's great. We definitely hope that he succeeds in the NFL. The Vols have a great history of, especially defensive players in the NFL, defensive line, Minister of Defense, Derek Barnett, long history of great defensive line and defensive players in general in the NFL. So we wish James Pierce Jr. all the best of luck with the Atlanta Falcons. Awesome story there, them trading back into the first round to take James Pierce Jr. at the 26th overall pick. Gentlemen, let's move next to the next Vol that was taken in the NFL draft. Now, I love this story, especially. It's no blind side necessarily, okay? But Omar Norman-Lott. All right, let's talk about this guy. He didn't have any family show up to senior day, right? A guy who is just out there giving it his all, doesn't maybe necessarily have the best support system around him, but because of his play on the field this past season and just in general his college career, he was able to get himself drafted to the NFL. Dakota, talk us through Omar Norman-Lott and where he landed.
Yeah, so he goes 63rd overall to the Kansas City Chiefs, gets to join other VFL Trey Smith, who now has a couple of rings. And he has an immediate path to start there as well. They have Chris Jones on the inside, who's one of the best defensive linemen in the NFL, but their second D tackle spot is up for grabs. So he is an interesting prospect because he was a bit polarizing in the media. There's a few people that didn't like him, like I don't want to give Mel Kiper any shout outs, but like the guy had a horrible opinion on him. And when he got drafted said some negative things, which was ridiculous. But the guys that Austin and I follow, they all loved him. The guys that checked the mic, they had him really high. Mike Renner absolutely loved the dude, had him super high on his board, and was a big fan of that pick. And it's because of his pass rush ability. He was a game wrecker on the interior. And that is something that is super valuable in today's NFL, being able to wreak havoc on the inside like that. So, and to be honest, he's still a bit raw. Like he didn't play a ton of snaps at Tennessee and before he transferred. So there's honestly a lot of ability for him to still grow. But I think it's a really good landing spot for him. Obviously, a good organization and a place where he could start pretty much immediately, or at the very least, be a situational pass rusher for them.
Yeah, definitely cool to see him join, like you said, VFL. Trey over there, Trey Smith, really awesome. Obviously, landing spot for him, Austin, and he slid into the second round, right? He slid right there at the second to last pick of the second round. So, what do you think about that spot for him in terms of landing in the second round and landing with the Chiefs?
Just to put Dakota's words into more concise words. The guys who know football liked Omar Norman-Lott. Let's just say it like that. The guys who
True.
actually know football, who watch tape, like Omar Norman-Lott. Mel Kiper's out of his prime, man. They really shouldn't have him on television anymore. But anyways, Omar Norman-Lott's a great pick, dude. I mean, he's going to fit in immediately to the Kansas City Chiefs, like Dakota just said. He does have a path to start. Orleans doesn't have him as a starter right now, but the guy in front of him, I think he could immediately jump him. And I mean, again, it's awesome to see him go to a team that's going to have success, dude. Just like Trey Smith. I mean, Trey Smith's an awesome story too. It's kind of interesting, but they have kind of like a Vol pipeline in there right now. We'll get into Will Brooks later, but they signed Will Brooks as well. So as a UDFA, so the Chiefs like their Vols, and I think he will be successful, man. Like Dakota said, at worst, he's a situational pass rusher at the next level because, I mean, he broke out in a massive way as a pass rusher last season, and we saw his impact all year, Blake. I mean, we talked about the strength of this team last year was our defensive line, dude, and it's no coincidence that we have 4 defensive linemen currently signed to NFL teams from this draft class. So, I mean, yeah, man, again, it speaks to that great defensive line next year or last year, and we need to continue that, man. The defensive line needs to be an emphasis every single season, and I'd like to see 5 or 6 of these guys get drafted every year, to be honest with you. But yeah, Omar Norman-Lott's going to have a great career, man. At worst, situational pass rusher, he's going to make an impact.
Look, we're staying positive, but I am a little upset that you spoiled the great Will Brooks news about getting signed as an undrafted free agent. But no, you're absolutely right. You know, this defensive line was obviously a strength for the Vols last season, and so the Chiefs are getting a great interior defensive lineman in Omar Norman-Lott. In terms of just kind of his fit and in terms of his impact, Dakota, do you have any other thoughts on how Omar Norman-Lott kind of fits with the Chiefs? And do you think, that was a good, is you all talked about how he's going to have a path to start. Do you think he's going to be able to make an impact? Do you think it's a good spot for him?
Yeah, definitely. I think so. I think he'll be able to get in there pretty early on and make a role. And also, one of the big things is having Chris Jones to learn from is also a really cool situation for him to be in. One of the best defensive linemen in the NFL. So he'll get to be right next to him, learn from him, maybe take over the reins for that kind of role for them. And he's also a really cool story because different than James Pierce Jr., who was already getting hyped to be a first round pick this time last year. Omar Norman-Lott was not high on draft boards whatsoever this time last year. So he played himself into earning being a second round pick like that, which is always cool to see. And yeah, with the Chiefs, I think he'll have an opportunity to play early. And make an impact in the pass rush specifically. Still a bit raw from a run defender perspective, but it's also interesting because he just didn't have many snaps as a run defender. We rotated our defense so much, and our team was focused on doing that, and they knew he was a better pass rusher. So that may be something he'll work on and get better at to be able to become like a true 3-down player. But he'll have time to do that, and he has guys to learn from. So I think it's a fantastic situation to go to.
Great to hear for sure. Austin, any other final thoughts on Omar Norman-Lott?
Yeah, I guess my only final thought would be that they used a second round pick on him, dude. That tells me they're extremely high on him, with a team that doesn't have a lot of draft capital. So they obviously wanted to get him in the building, and he also was picked quite a bit higher than his consensus. I think like 15, 14 picks higher than his consensus ranking. So I think the league was pretty high on him. So, I mean, it's just good to see, man. Again, we just need more of these stories, right? And next year, I hope we're talking about 8 guys instead of just 4. But
yeah, it's going to be great to see how many defensive players Tim Banks can coach into getting drafted, right? The fact y'all bring a spectacular point about Omar Norman-Lott not really being projected like this coming into the year, and then boom, he gets drafted second round after the way he played this year. And obviously you hope that is in part due to the coaching and the development from our defensive staff. So you love to see that. And yeah, I'm glad, Austin, that you brought up that final point there about how he did get drafted, because I think when we did our preview, we were talking about his consensus and potentially looking like a 3rd round pick. So really awesome to see him come in on the 2nd round. We will now transition over to the next Vol to get drafted. Now, we thought Dylan Sampson would be kind of going around this range of second to third round, but actually, surprisingly, ended up being Dante Thornton Jr. to get picked next. So, Austin, talk us through Dante Thornton, where he landed, and what your thoughts were there.
So he went at the top of the fourth round, 108 overall, to the Raiders, man. Thought it was a fascinating landing spot just right off the get go. We talked about coming in how Dante Thornton could be just like a fourth wide receiver, deep threat kind of guy. But the Raiders fit in particular is pretty interesting because my comp for him, he's basically DK Metcalf with 30 pounds less muscle. That's how I see him. He has a similar route trees as DK Metcalf. And if you look into the Raiders, Blake, Pete Carroll's the coach. Pete Carroll coached DK Metcalf for most of his career, and they traded for Geno Smith, the quarterback that was throwing to DK Metcalf last season. So I kind of like that fit, man. They kind of got their DK Metcalf in a sense. I do think his ceiling's not as high as DK's because, again, DK kind of brought that contested catchability as well, which Dante's really not going to bring to the table. But he's going to fit in right away with this Raiders receiving core, man. I mean, Dakota and I were talking during the draft. This is a very weak receiving core, so he's going to be able to come in and make an impact pretty much immediately.
Be great to see if he can do that because, again, we're talking about a guy who, when he transferred to UT, we knew he was fast, right? But we didn't know much about, is this guy going to be able to translate to the NFL? Is he going to be able to be drafted fairly high? And he came in, and Austin, I think we talked pretty much throughout the season last year that he ended up being one of our best weapons on offense, if not the best weapon outside of Dylan Sampson, right? So absolutely huge to see him develop that way. And then, as you mentioned, going in the top of the fourth round here. So, Dakota, what do you think about that landing spot for him to the Raiders? And were you surprised by this landing spot for him in terms of, his over-under on his consensus?
Yeah, so he actually did go a bit higher than I thought. I kind of thought he would go in the fifth round. His consensus was actually 171. So he went a good bit higher than what the consensus had him at, which again, it's always cool to see when that happens, because it means that team really liked him. The Raiders loved him. He must have done well in their interviews and liked what they saw on tape. But I think it's a really fascinating landing spot for him. And I think that comp is really good because he's so raw in terms of what he's done, because we also didn't ask him to do much. He had like the highest yards per reception last season, I think, in college football, per minimum amount of catches. So when the dude gets the ball in his hand, he takes off. So he's honestly been not utilized that much. He's still got some fresh legs on him, which run a 4.3, which is, insanely fast. So the Raiders also took Jack Besh in the second round, wide receiver out of TCU, who has a very different skill set than him. So something that I think complements well. It's not a guy that he'll be competing a little bit to be on the field with him, but not really. They're two guys that can coexist on the field together. So cool to see the Raiders, double up their receiver, add a guy with Dante's skill set, stretch the field, give Geno a weapon to go deep down the field with. And again, he could be. He'll probably be getting some snaps pretty early on there as a guy to at least go in, stretch the field, if not kind of grow into more of a consistent role at receiver there.
Yeah, I hope he is able to make an impact because Austin, one guy that I think of that ended up getting drafted and he went to the Giants, and maybe as a result of Heupel's system, he was able to demonstrate his speed and all of that good stuff in terms of someone Jalen Hyatt, right? The guy that we're talking about is Jalen Hyatt, and someone that we maybe didn't think would have as good of a year as he did or get drafted like he did, but then he did after the year he had with Josh Heupel's system. And so far, from what I understand, he hasn't, been a huge impact so far in the NFL. Do you think Dante Thornton Jr. is going to be a different case than Jalen Hyatt?
I do. And Vols fans, don't hate me for saying this. I'm going to bring some nuance to this because I think Jalen Hyatt and Dante Thornton got drafted to do the same thing, but Dante Thornton's just going to be way better at it. I mean, he's faster, he's bigger, and Jalen Hyatt is he's limited as well. And I think we kind of all thought he could project better to the NFL because I thought he was going to be able to expand his route tree in the NFL. But in fairness to Hyatt, he's had top like or bottom 30 quarterback play the last couple of years. So who knows? Maybe if they finally get a quarterback that's competent, then he'll be able to break out and have a breakout season. So I think he has some potential left over in the NFL because that offense, that offense just couldn't target him deep down the field because their offensive line was so poor and everything like that. But so we'll see. I don't think Hyatt's journey's over yet. But as far as being a deep threat, that fourth option in an offense, Dante Thornton's just built better to do that than Hyatt. Like I said, he's faster, he's bigger. So yeah, I think Dante Thornton. Listen, I'm not going to say he's going to become like an 1,000-yard receiver or something like that in the NFL, but he's going to make an impact, man. He's going to be on. He's going to be on the field. You're going to see him get a couple deep touchdowns every couple weeks in the NFL, kind of thing. So yeah, I would definitely keep an eye out for him this year because, like again, he went to the landing spot that he's going to play immediately.
Definitely good news for Dante Thornton Jr. and good news for, look, Dakota, Austin, I'm just going to say it. I still believe we're wide receiver U, okay? I know there's other schools that want to argue about that. USC, Clemson, for some reason, wants to get in the conversation now. I'm still going to hold to Tennessee being wide receiver U, baby. So love to see a Vol receiver head into the NFL to make an impact there. Dakota, you got any final thoughts on Dante Thornton Jr.?
Yeah, I do agree with Austin too. I do think he has his size and speed combined make him just more likely to have that high upside to be able to develop into something a little bit better at the next level. I think Hyatt also had, the benefit of Hendon Hooker and also the benefit of our offense just being unstoppable that season. Like how many times in that season was Hyatt wide open? And part of that's his ability to run, but part of it was just the scheme that year was unstoppable. So I think that also limited Hyatt a little bit when getting to the NFL, that things were very different and a bit shocking. In this past season, our passing game wasn't very good. So Dante Thornton was used to the adversity and whatnot. So, but yeah, at his size, the 6'5", 205, running a 4.3, he had like a 1.5, 110 yard, means he gets off fast too. So I just think his skill set could lead him somewhere, but not to say Hyatt can't develop, because Austin also makes a good point. When you're playing with the quarterbacks you have for the Giants, it's hard to know if the receivers are good or not. Malik Neighbors was obviously really good, but outside of that, it's like it's a tough situation. So hopefully now Jackson Dart's there now, so maybe High will put it together for him. We'll see.
We'll see.
One can only hope. Definitely hope. And I wasn't necessarily trying to kind of throw Hyatt under the bus there. It's just, a guy that we hoped would translate better, like you said, Austin, to the NFL, and it just hasn't, for whatever reason, kind of.
We're talking about the NFL right now, but at the end of the day, 5 touchdowns against Alabama makes you a legend forever, brother. He's never paying for a beer in Knoxville ever again, dude.
He best not, dude, because I tell you what, that was definitely one of the best performances of all time. Absolute GOAT. Actually, it's funny. I was just today rewatching the highlights from the 2022 Alabama game. His that just picture perfect TD, that it's the kind of the behind the back shot, and then the Alabama cornerback is just kind of dejected, putting his head down. One of the greatest football videos of all time. I've still got that on my phone. So Hyatt is an absolute legend.
Speaking of another UT legend.
Yeah, let us now transition to we talked about Dante Thornton Jr. being maybe kind of the second best weapon on offense. The best weapon on offense was the final guy to get drafted, which is Dylan Sampson. Old D-Samp, Dakota. Talk us through where D-Samp landed. It was a little lower than this. This is the one guy that landed a little lower than we expected him to, wanted him to, but he did get drafted. Talk to us about his landing spot.
Yeah, so he goes 126th overall to the Cleveland Browns. Again, to Austin's point, the ball knowers, the guys that we follow. One of the guys had him, I think, as RB2. Austin, I think he was RB2 for him. Okay, so he had him ranked as his second running back. He was 90th on the consensus and goes at 126. So he did go a good bit lower than what we thought. And, what's interesting, the Browns took Quinshon Judkins at Ohio State at 36 and then turn around and take D-Samp later on. So they doubled up at running back. But I think it's still a really interesting landing spot for him because Nick Chubb is about to be on his way out. He doesn't have knees anymore, so they needed to get some guys in there. And Quinshawn is a very different running back than Dylan Sampson. Quinshawn is like a bruiser, pound the rock type guy, and Sampson's got that low center of gravity, can bust it outside, can turn anything into a home run. He's that home run hitter style. So I think they'll complement each other really well. And something that I think talked about on the pre-draft show was how we didn't utilize him a ton in the passing game. And I think that could be part of the plan for him in Cleveland is that Judkins is that bruiser on first and second down, and then you throw DeSamp in there and you could run with him. You could utilize him out of the backfield. You can do a lot with him. So, for anybody that feels discouraged that they drafted a running back ahead of him, I wouldn't worry about a ton because I think there's still the opportunity for him to get his touches and honestly keep his legs a bit longer if he's not being asked to do too much too early.
Austin DeSamp, second half of the 4th round. How do you think that pick was, and what do you think about it?
I like a lot of what Dakota will say or what Dakota said, and I will add. I don't think it's guaranteed that Junkins is going to start, man. If you draft a guy in the 2nd round and the 4th round, that's a competition. I mean, now if you would have taken Junkins in the 1st round, then you would be more committed to okay, we have to utilize this guy. But at the end of the day, if Dylan Sampson is better in camp, they will play Dylan Sampson. But to a better point, I would say is listen, in the NFL, there's no bell cows anymore, right? People aren't getting 30 carries a game and just using one running back. They will use multiple running backs. And so I think that's the plan. I think they will use both Sampson and Junkins in that same offense. So yeah, I'm excited for what DeSamp can do. I was a little bit disappointed that he didn't go a little bit higher. But I still think he's in a solid situation, man. The Browns are rebuilding. But Dylan Sampson, they wanted Dylan Sampson a part of that rebuild, man. So that is pretty encouraging. And I think he's going to be a good player. He's going to contribute, right? He's going to be a contributor. I don't know if he's going to become a Pro Bowler or whatever, but it wouldn't surprise me. Dylan Sampson has the intangibles that I love, man. I think he has the intangibles that could make him a great NFL player. And it's just like Kamara. When Kamara got drafted in the 3rd round, nobody expected him to just take over the Saints backfield and become kind of a superstar right off the gate. Or right out of the gate. So yeah, man, I mean, who knows what his potential is going to be in the NFL, but I like it. I think he's going to, at the very least, he's going to be a good contributor, but could become a great player.
Well, because we have to remember that at the beginning of his career at Tennessee, he was a part of the committee, right? The running back committee. And he slowly started to set himself apart until he became a household name amongst Vols fans. So, Dakota, do you think he has an opportunity to do the same with the Browns here?
Absolutely, yeah. I mean, we also talking, in a bit different light from some of the other guys we've talked about, but I mean, Dylan Sampson's also a fantastic guy to have in your locker room. So that's another aspect that he plays in. I'm assuming that a lot of teams loved him when they met with him. But obviously, the Browns were one of the ones that said, it doesn't matter who we've already taken, we want this guy in our locker room. So I think he'll become an immediate favorite for Browns fans. I actually already saw when we posted the clip of him being drafted with some of his highlights. I saw a bunch of Browns fans flooding the comments there that were excited about the pick. So I definitely think he has the opportunity to make an impact pretty early. With Austin's point too, would have liked to have seen him gone earlier. And he still has a path to play, and he will obviously and compete. But it would have also been nice to see him go to a team where he kind of was immediately plugged in as RB1. There's a couple of teams we were kind of waiting to see. We knew a lot were going to take running backs, and we're kind of waiting to see which ones they take and where. So it would have been cool to see him go somewhere else where he was just the one guy they took. But even with them taking Judkins, there's still a clear path for him, to Austin's point, compete for that starting job. And if he doesn't get it, I'd be shocked if they still didn't find a use for him coming out of the backfield for Cleveland.
Absolutely. Again, wish Dylan Sampson all the best in the NFL. You all both touched on the big piece with Dylan Sampson, which is just you want that guy in your locker room. Great dude, awesome character, and so definitely wish him the best. Once again, a Tennessee legend, and has cemented himself into Volunteer history.
The great
Dylan Sampson. The
great.
He is forever known as the great. So we wish him all the best in the NFL. Now, gentlemen, let's end with, before we kind of just give some final thoughts on the class overall, let's go into and end with the undrafted free agents that got signed. I believe we are looking at 3 Vols who have thus far been signed as undrafted free agents. Austin spoiled the great Will Brooks earlier. He did get signed. Love to see that. Man, I'm telling you, y'all, I was watching the big board and I saw Brew at the top of the big board, and I'm just thinking, Brew, man, he's right there in those final rounds, 6 and 7. I was hoping he'd come off. He did not come off. Gentlemen, Austin, talk us through. Did Brew get signed? What are the other balls that got signed?
Not signed yet. There's only 3 that we know have been signed, but listen, they have agents negotiating contracts. They're going to be in talks with teams. Brew will get a shot at the next level. Listen, 5-star coming out of high school with the size and the intangibles. I'm shocked he didn't get drafted, to be honest, just with all that in mind. But it was a deep receiver class, even though it wasn't great at the top. But the guys assigned right now, Elijah Simmons for the Cardinals. I believe the Cardinals who need defensive line depth. And then Amari Thomas signed as potentially as a guard. Blake, he played defensive tackle here, but they have him listed on offense, so he could be a potential guard option for the Saints. And then the great Will Brooks, playmaker, first one in for last one out kind of guy. My Casey Clausen Award winner on the year. So yeah, Will Brooks was signed to the Kansas City Chiefs. Kind of surprised to see him be one of the first UDFA signed, to be honest with you, just because of the lack of athleticism and stuff. But he makes big plays, man. He makes big plays in big time moments. So
you just talked about how he's your Casey Clausen Award winner, and then you're going to insult the man saying he's lacking athleticism.
No, dude, that just speaks to how good of a ball player he is, dude. He's a smart guy.
Just great ball knowledge, right? He's just real smart guy, real good ball knowledge. Yeah, okay, got it. Man. Casey Clausen, man.
Yes.
All right, Dakota, what do you think about these Vols who have been signed so far as undrafted free agents?
Yeah, I think I'm a little surprised that Brew didn't get either drafted or just signed immediately. But like Tossin's point, this is going to be going on for the next few weeks. As we get into camp, guys are going to start immediately getting cut, injured. People are going to get a shot over the next few months to make an impact somewhere. All of them went to really interesting spots, to be honest. They went to spots that the position they play, the teams either don't have a ton of depth there or they kind of have open jobs for the starting positions. Brooks went with the Chiefs. They have they signed somebody in free agency, but they don't have a ton of depth. A couple guys that are, lower name that, you may want to invest if he looks good in camp, just the younger guy and keep him on the roster for cheaper. And then Austin touched on it. The Cardinals defensive line needed help. So Elijah Simmons will have a ton of opportunity to compete in camp as we move toward that and make an impact, try to play there. And if Amari does go to the offensive line for the Saints, they do have an issue at guard. They signed Dylan Radins to play guard, who, as a Titans fan, he's not the answer. Saints, he's not. So Amari has a chance to compete for that spot for sure. So they went to interesting spots where, who knows if they make the team or not, right? Because there's a lot of offseason to be had, but they at least went to some interesting spots to try to compete for positions that all 3 of those teams needed at least depth at. So
hopefully they'll make the rosters. Would love to see it, especially for the great Will Brooks. Despite the disrespect, we hope that guy lands.
No disrespect. He won my Casey Clausen of the Man award. Like, what the heck? That's not disrespectful. I literally gave him an off-season or a yearly award, dude. How is that disrespectful?
Absolutely. You're right. He's true.
Just speaking to his strengths, brother.
True impact player. Austin, do you think Brew is going to get signed as an undrafted free agent?
I do. I think Brew will get signed. I think Cooper Mays will get signed. I think a few other guys will get signed as well. Hey, dude, we've had UDFAs make impacts before. Arian Foster, as a running back, came into the league as an undrafted free agent and became a Pro Bowler. He had a few years where he was a fantastic NFL running back. So these guys' stories aren't over, dude. They have chances to go make an impact in the NFL and on the next level. So, but again, dude, I want to see more names, right? 4 players is not enough. It's not enough, dude. We need like 8 to 10 yearly. That's where it should be. That's where it was during the Phil Former days, and that's where it has to be if we want to compete for national championships.
1,000%. Definitely got to see more names going to the NFL because that means we've got better talent on the roster to be able to win in college, which this is a Vols podcast. We want to see the Vols win. We would love to see our Vols go on and make a huge impact in the NFL, but we want to see our Vols win for sure. Dakota, give us your just final thoughts on this draft class overall for the Vols. We're talking about 4 Vols getting drafted and a few getting signed as undrafted free agents. And just talking about the Vols in general. Let's talk about just your final thoughts on, from a Volunteers fans perspective,
Right.
What this draft class means.
Yeah, I think Austin's completely right. We talked about it on the pre-draft show about, how many prospects we just were looking at, comparing that to other teams, the Alabamas, the Georgias, the Ohio States, the teams competing for national championships every year. To get to that level, you got to have the talent and the guys to get drafted, and we need to get there. 4 is not enough, but these 4 guys specifically that did, I think they have awesome, a lot of legends for us, right? Like JPJ and obviously D-Samp and what Omar Norman-Lott and Dante did, both transferring here and becoming VFLs. I'd love to see them get drafted and go have a chance to start somewhere and make an impact. And for the same for the UDFAs, to Austin's point, it's not like a high probability thing, but UDFAs do go on to become pretty good players sometimes, even Pro Bowlers. So their stories definitely aren't over. But yeah, would love to see more guys get drafted, and hopefully continue to build out this roster, which will make us a championship contender. And just looking ahead to thinking forward, we already have on PFF's board. They've released their way too early 2026 one, so it's never too early to start looking ahead. And Jermon McCoy is already 8th on that. They have him 8th overall right now, and then Joshua Joseph's at 38. So a couple Vols in the top 50 already on that board to keep an eye on this season. That have the opportunity to get drafted pretty high next year. So hopefully they can help lead that class to get us above 4.
Definitely want to. We're happy for the 4 that got drafted this year. They're Tennessee greats, but definitely want to get above that 4 number. Austin, final word.
The only issue I have with what Dakota just said is he mentioned Alabama and national championship contenders. Those days are done. Those are long gone. Ever since Nick Saban retired, dude, they only had 7 players drafted, okay? And that number is going to get lower and lower, Alabama. Okay, don't say anything about our QB battle because y'all got a battle on camp too, and it's not going so well. So that's the only issue I have with what he said. But outside of that, he's spot on everything, dude. Their stories aren't over, but we need more. We just need more guys, because once we get to that 8 to 10 number or even 14, then all of a sudden we're going to see playoff runs. That's when we're going to see making impact in the playoffs instead of just making it to the playoffs. And yep, there you go. And getting to short, because we don't want that again.
1,000%. Don't want to get short in the playoffs, but we want to win championships because that's what Tennessee football is all about. Okay, that's our number 1 concern on this Vol Talk podcast is Tennessee winning championships. Our number 2 concern is Alabama hate. So, Austin, I'm glad that you were able to
cover it all.
To get that in there. That's absolutely a necessity on each Vol Talk episode. Gentlemen, thank you all for your insight on this Vol draft class. Good stuff. Again, we wish these Vols all the best of luck in the NFL. Definitely want to see them go on to make an impact. And again, Dakota, Austin, appreciate y'all's analysis. Folks, thank y'all for joining us for this episode. This has been a review of the Vols in the 2025 NFL Draft. Please, again, if you haven't already, go ahead and hit that subscribe button. If you're listening on Spotify, go ahead and give us a follow. And drop us a comment, whether you're on Spotify or YouTube. Drop us a comment so we can get that algorithm going. Give us a like on the video. We'd really appreciate it. We really appreciate y'all's support. We are going to be, as usual, continuing to cover the baseball season and anything and everything related to volunteer sports, including off-season football news as well. So we will catch y'all soon. Until then, as always, baby, go Vols.
GBO.